you find an antique clock at a flea market, its hands frozen at midnight, but its pendulum still swinging with a soft, rhythmic sway. The air feels inexplicably colder each time you glance at it, and a persistent whisper seems to haunt the edges of your hearing, counting down seconds that you cannot trace. Before we go further, write the hour and place you're listening from in the comments, like the video, and subscribe if you haven't already. You had no intention of buying it. The old clock sat crookedly on a rickety shelf, wedged between cracked porcelain dolls and dust-covered leather books. Its wood, faded and splintered at the edges, breathed an exhaustion that seemed out of place among the clutter. The moment your fingers brushed the cold glass face, the air shifted like the slow exhale of a patient breathing down your neck. A hesitant shiver crawled along your spine, but you ignored it. The clock's hands were frozen at exactly midnight, the numerals blurred unevenly across the glass. Yet, the pendulum swung steadily, emitting a quiet, almost hypnotic tick-tock that swallowed the surrounding sounds. You thought it was broken, or perhaps deliberately designed that way. The vendor, a gaunt man with tired eyes and a crooked smile, offered no explanations, only a price whispered low and urgent. The unease followed you home, stitched tightly around the slowly cooling room like a secret you hadn't agreed to keep. That night, as you set the clock on your mantle, the temperature dipped suddenly. Your breath misted under the faint glow of your bedside lamp, an unnatural chill that wasn't coming from the drafty window or the thin walls. You blinked against the cold, watching the pendulum sway in the dark silence. Midnight was still frozen on its face, but the rhythm pulled you in. You felt like the clock was waiting, as if the stillness of its hands kept something suspended just out of sight. The whispers started then. At first, you barely caught them, like a rustle behind your ear or the brush of silk across a cold surface. They weren't words exactly, more like counting soft, relentless, high-pitched numbers just beyond your understanding, always quickening when you tried to listen. You turned your head, expecting to catch a stray radio wave or the whir of your heater, but nothing was there. The sound wasn't in the room. It was in your skin. Sleep came in fits, tangled with the feeling of unseen eyes tracing your movements. The pendulum's sway was the last thing you saw each night. It dragged you closer to a dreamless edge, a place where time stuttered like a broken record, stuck between two frames of reality. You told yourself you were imagining it, that the whispering was just your weary mind's way of making sense of the silence. But each morning, the air by the clock was colder than the night before, and the feeling intensified. One night, the stillness fractured sharply. You were halfway through reaching out to touch the cold wood when the clock's face jumped. The minute hand twitched, then snapped forward exactly 1 minute, dragging your breath out with it. A snap of cold struck your chest so hard it stole your voice. You recoiled, heart beating a frantic tattoo against your ribs. The pendulum's swing accelerated, rhythmic now like a heartbeat, pulsing with unnatural speed. The whispers flooded your ears, number after number, thick and urgent, drowning the silence. It felt like your fear was measured out in those moments, accounted for by the clock itself. You backed away, knocked into your chair, and it creaked loudly in the shrinking quiet. Your skin prickled. Something flickered at the edge of your vision, just a shadow, or maybe a trick of the dim light. Your breath caught. Then, a sharp crack from the clock. The glass face shattered inward suddenly, shards tinkling like glass teeth dropping into a dark well. Your startled gasp crumbled the night's fragile calm. The whispering cut off abruptly, as if severed by the sudden violence. You stared down at the broken clock, chest heaving, watching the pendulum still swing wildly, now almost frantically, as if it was desperate to count whatever had been lost in the silence. The temperature plummeted again, colder than before, ice curling at the backs of your hands, despite the warmth of your blanket. Your eyes searched the room, but everything was exactly where you left it, all except the clock. Its damaged face now revealed an inner mechanism, unlike any you'd ever seen. A twisting spiral of black metal, etched with faint symbols that barely glimmered in the pale light. You couldn't decipher what they meant, but the way the pendulum swayed told you it wasn't just keeping time. It was counting something else, something alive. The whisper returned, softer now, almost coaxing, nearer. Its cadence slowed, folding around your thoughts, dragging them taut. You realized it wasn't just counting seconds. It was counting down a tally that started the moment you touched it. They were not random digits, but an account of your fear, every heartbeat, every shiver, every breath caught in your throat added to an unseen sum. You wanted to look away, to leave the clock to whatever darkness it breathed. But the cold kept you where you were, doubled down in your chair, eyes locked on its persistent pendulum. The night stretched thinner, shrinking your space, folding the room tighter around you. The whispers lingered just at the edges of hearing. The cold grew, pressing down like a winter deep inside your bones. What had you bought? A broken clock or a doorway? The question rippled through the still air, unanswered for now. Before we go further, take a deep breath, because this only just begins. The clock's hands slipped backward, not forward, not even still. They recoiled, scraping the face like brittle fingernails dragging over worn wood. You feel it then, a drop in the air, cold breath sliding along your skin, like the room itself is shivering in fear. The faint ticking slows, irregular, as if the clock itself pulses with something dark and sentient. It counts not time, but dread. Every tick tightens the unseen noose around your throat. You strain to make out the numbers, but the face warps and blurs. The numbers don't count minutes or hours anymore. They count moments left to endure, to live, to breathe. The clock's eyes have turned inward. There, between the warped numerals, faint scratches appear, tiny marks clawed into the wood, growing deeper with each tick, as if the clock feeds on your mounting terror. something moves behind the glass. No, something's not behind, but within it. A shadow flickers just beyond your vision, twisting like smoke shaped by whispered secrets. Your breath catches, sharp and shallow. The room feels suddenly close, oppressive. The air smells metallic like rusted chains dragged over stone. The cold drips down your spine, slow and deliberate, reluctant to let go. You reach out, drawn by a force tethered to the clock. Your fingers graze the cold, varnished wood. A ripple vibrates through the surface, cold thrum pulsing through your skin and splintering your thoughts. The ticking shifts, speeding up, then pausing, a cruel heartbeat skipping. Then, without warning, the room plunges into darkness for a moment, a breathless blink. Light floods back, and in the darkest corner, a figure stands still, staring. The shadows peel back like cracked paint to reveal a face, too close, too pale, eyes hollow and burning with quiet accusation. You jerk your hand away, heart hammering. It's not there. No one ever is. Just the unwinding silence that follows. The clock's hands move again, but the numbers have changed. No longer digits, they are names, etched jaggedly, forgotten victims, their names curling like tendrils of smoke, some crossed out, some bleeding into one another. You recognize one. Your name. Your skin prickles with icy shards, the cold settling like frostbite on your nerves. The rules have shifted. This clock doesn't just measure fear, it consumes it, burns it to ash, and marks what remains. Every moment of terror spent here adds weight, a crushing debt you didn't ask for, but cannot undo. The tapping begins then, soft at first, almost rhythmic. A slow knock on the far wall, then another, third, irregular, like fingertips drumming a warning. But your ears know better. The knock is muffled, as if beneath layers of fabric or wood. The sound invokes a pulse in your chest, subtle and relentless. A countdown embedded in the room's walls, beneath the shadows creeping along the floor. You glance back at the clock. The name beside yours has grown jagged, cracks splintering the wood around it, veins of darkness seeping outward, shrinking the space. Panic coils in your stomach, venomous and sharp. There is no safe corner here. The ticking becomes a chant, a slow crescendo undercut with something mournful, as if the clock mourns your impending surrender. Whispers follow, then faint, fractured voices brushing against the edge of hearing, sharp as broken glass. They speak in a language you almost understand. Time runs thinner when fear is a currency. One breathes. Another hisses, counting down what you cannot outrun. You freeze, sensations keening into overdrive, the pulse in the walls, the cold seeping under your clothes, the breath caught at the base of your throat. The faintest flicker of light pulses again. Shadows stretch unnaturally, long and twitching, as if reaching for you. The world ripples, the familiar bending in impossible angles. You realize the clock isn't simply a keeper of moments, it's a collector of essence. Your pulse, your breath, your mounting dread. It steals pieces of you, replacing time with something far more sinister. You must decide, step back, leave and face whatever comes after the countdown ends, or touch the clock again to try and unravel its secret before it's too late. The air thickens. Cold turns sharp, licking at your throat like icy knives. The tapping quickens faster now, a frantic beat that echoes your racing heart. With trembling fingers, you reach out. The clock is no longer just wood and glass. It feels alive beneath your skin, pulsing like a living thing, dark and hungry. The hands stop moving. Silence falls, but it is heavy, expectant. Then the numbers twist violently, shifting, reforming not into the names of others, but into a twisted mirror of your own face, fragmented and distorting. It whispers your deepest fears, secrets you've never uttered, fears you tried to bury under smiles and routine. They seep through the cracks of your mind, raw and exposed. This is no longer a game or a riddle. It's a curse tightening like a noose. The cold becomes unbearable. The light flickers one last time, revealing the shadow figure closer now. So close you can feel the ragged breath freezing against your cheek. A sudden, shattering crack explodes as the glass splinters beside your hand, sharp shards slicing into skin. Your scream is swallowed instantly by the hush, the room swallowing sound, time distorting into a vortex of icy silence and desperate tapping. And then the hands start moving again, faster, the names rearranged, the tapping relentless. The countdown resumes, and you are trapped in its endless currency of fear. The clock still counts, and it knows exactly how much you have left. The ticking's different now. It's slower, heavier, like it breathes alongside you, matching the quickening pulse at your throat. That clock, once a curiosity on the mantle, has settled into something far less benign. Every tick drags the air colder, the room shrinking all around, squeezing tighter, until you swear you can feel the edge of fear folding back onto your skin. It's no longer counting hours or minutes. It's counting something else, something darker, something that's just begun. You stare, numb, at the glass face that never smiles. The hands have stopped moving, but the silence between ticks stretches longer, thicker, pregnant with the weight of inevitability. A crooked shadow curves beneath the rim where the numbers used to be, a slow vomit of blackness pooling inward. Your fingers twitch against the rough wood, an itch you cannot scratch. And then, as if summoned by your hesitation, the hum of a distant voice coils through the walls, barely there, but unmistakable. Whispered words, tangled in static, so low you almost miss them. Time to pay. The phrase presses your chest flat, roots your feet in the floor, as a cold wave spills from the corners of the room. Your breath hitches, shallow and urgent, the shivering cadence of your lungs a mirror to the clock's stuttering tick. On impulse, you step forward, the wooden floorboards groaning beneath a weight that feels both yours and not yours, something lingering, watching. The hands of the clock rebel, jerking sharply, then freezing again at 317. Your eye catches a subtle glimmer, barely perceptible, a stain slowly darkening at the base of the clock's stem. Not just any stain. It shifts, twitching as if alive, the glint settling into the shape of a tiny, trembling handprint. The room plunges deeper into cold blackness, though the windows are shut tight. The red glow at the clock's center pulses faintly now, like a heartbeat you can see but cannot touch. A deep tapping starts soft but relentless on the inside of the clock's casing. Tap, tap, tap. Each beat matches a drop of your own blood crawling beneath your skin. You lean closer, eyes wide, your voice caught somewhere between a breath and a plea. The tapping escalates, louder, urgent, a spelling out of desperation only you can comprehend. Your world fractures around you. The flickering light bulb hanging from the ceiling sputters and dies, plunging the room into almost absolute darkness, save for the glow that oozes from the clock's face. It isn't just light. It's something alive, something that's tasting the air, measuring your fear by the second. The tapping mutates, slower, deliberate. A code. 3 heavy knocks, then 2 lighter taps, and a pause that stretches like the space between heartbeats. You, there's no other way to put it, are being summoned. It feels like fingers, cold and thin, tracing the spine of your neck. You try to pull away, but the cold grips you tighter, as if the room itself has caught you in a living web. The clock's ticking changes again, no longer mechanical, but palpably organic, a wet, sucking rhythm, a dying breath squeezed from some endless, unseen throat. You notice now that the numbers around the clock's face have dissolved into strange, twisted symbols. They writhe and shift as you blink, letters contorting into faces you can't quite place, faces dripping with desperation and malice. Your eyes burn with the need to look away, but your feet drag you closer, drawn by some corrupt gravity. The air thickens with a heavy musk of cold metal and burnt wirings tangled in the smell of stale smoke. Personal, intimate, like something that's been waiting for you, watching as you uncovered its secret. The chilling truth unfurls between your ribs. This clock isn't just a timer. It's a conduit, a collector of dread. Each tick siphons your terror, feeding it to some lurking hunger nestled just beyond the edges of your vision. You're not simply tracking time left. You're bleeding it into the dark. The clock breathes your fear in, exhales something far worse. Then, a sudden crash inside the clock's wooden shell. Something heavy shatters, spilling into the silence, a metallic clatter like chains thrown on cold stone. You jump, the gasp ripped from your throat, a ragged, broken sound that echoes into the thick dark. This is first jump scare, immediate, jarring, but earned. The pause after forces your heart to hammer an uneven rhythm, pounding in your ears. Rallying, you push your trembling hands back, desperate for space. The clock's light retracts just enough for you to spot the fractured glass of its face. Shards reflect distorted glimpses of your own wittied reflection. Fragmented, and fractured like the calm you thought you still had. Beneath the clock, on the floorboards, now spreads a creeping stain of darkness that grows, pulsing with a rhythm slower than the clock tick, but deeper, the steady beat of something waking. Your skin burns cold and hot all at once as the tapping shifts, spiraling into a sinister cadence, threading through the walls. Your throat tightens, you can almost hear the room's breath, shallow and quivering, waiting, expecting. This is no longer about time running out. It's about what happens when the clock demands more than your fear, when it claims something you didn't know it could take. A soft whisper brushes your ear, a name, not yours, something alien and ancient. The name curls like smoke, tickling your spine with promises of endless nights, eternal chasing. You swallow hard, feeling the weight of a new truth settling in the pit of your stomach. The clock doesn't just punish fear, it feeds on names, on the essence behind the trembling flesh. And it wants to learn yours. Your fingers lift to the clock, compelled despite every shred of reason. The air around it thickens, suffocating, as hot breath seems to exhale from the glass itself. The room brightens just enough to reveal the clock's center, where the hands suddenly twist violently backward, spinning faster and faster until the ticking becomes a roar in your ears. Time no longer flows forward, it surges backward, dragging you into memories that aren't your own. Whispered screams in empty halls, shadows sliding beneath doors, laughter that isn't joyful but broken, cracked across decades you didn't live but somehow remember. Each recollection crashes through you, mixing with the cold sweat dripping down your back, twisting your reality into jagged shards of terror. You try to pull away. You must, but your hands freeze, numb, unwilling. The clock grips you inside its pulse, a lodestone of terror anchoring you in place. A final tapping, a desperate plea, rattles the casing. The hands stop abruptly at midnight. In that silent instant, the cold whispers back, clear, sharp, unmistakable, your turn. The clock's hands stuttered, dragging slow across the tarnished face, each second a shudder, as if counting not time, but the pounding of your own pulse. You could feel it now, the cold pressing in sharper, as though the night itself had slid beneath your skin. There was no denying it anymore. The clock was alive, its purpose no longer hidden in shadows, but screaming in silence. It did not just measure time. It devoured your fear, growing hungrier with every tremble that rose in your throat. You had thought it was a curse you could outwait, a cruel token left behind by some whimsy of fate, that maybe its hunger could be starved by patience. But the deeper the night sank, the more you learned its hunger was endless. The ticking no longer echoed in the room, it throbbed under your ribs, a dark drum pulling tight the threads of your nerves. It wasn't counting down, it was counting through you, your hands trembling. You fingered the edge of the clock, cold, metal against clammy skin, and a realization knifed through the dread. The clock was not just a machine. It was a mirror. Every tick was a reflection of your escalating terror. Every chime a summons deeper into the darkness you tried to outrun. You squeezed your eyes shut. The world narrowed to the sound of your shallow breathing, the oppressive press of cold air curling like smoke through your lungs. You could no longer tell if the room was shrinking or if you were bloating with panic. Either way, escape was no longer a question. The clock's hunger was your prison, and then the tap, sharp, single, echoed from the hallway outside your door. Your breath caught on a sharp inhale, bones paling as your mind, desperate for something solid, jumped to remember the rules. The clock's only payment was fear, and you had paid in fullness. Borrowed time was running dry. The tapping grew rhythmic, deliberate, like knuckles drumming out a countdown you hadn't yet deciphered. You swallowed wetly, voice caught somewhere between a whisper and a wail. What waited out there, beyond your fragile barricade of light and trembling heartbeats? You dared not look. The light flickered, as if the room itself flicked through moments of twisted clarity. The clock's face warped from brass to something darker, something pulling from nightmares well deep enough to bleed. Shadows clawed at the edges of your vision. They were coming closer. The temperature dropped fast, an icy breath against the nape of your neck, across your exposed skin, threading cold fingers inside your shirt. With shaking courage, you lifted a hand and pressed it to the clock face. The glass shivered beneath your palm, like skin stretched over a living thing, pulsing. The hands spun wildly for one dreadful second, then all fell still, pointing to exactly midnight. Your heart slammed as the silence screamed. Then the seconds resumed, but slower, malicious, hungry. The time had shifted, twisted beyond logic. This was not just counting your fear anymore, it was reshaping it, bending the flow of reality into a new, cruel rhythm. You had to get rid of it, had to break the cycle. But with the weight of the clock's gaze on you, the very thought felt suicidal. It was no longer a gift, not a cursed heirloom. It was a parasite, anchoring itself between each breath, siphoning away your will. Every attempt to throw it away, smash it, or bury it in darkness was met with a ruthless resistance. The ticking would follow, scratch at stone and wood, whisper inside your mind in rhythms you couldn't unhear. Then came the memory, a fragment you'd locked away, filtered through nightmare. The old woman who had handed you the clock had warned you. It does not hunger for things you can give. It wants what you hide in your silence. Your dread without name, your dread without shape. Feed it, and it grows stronger. Starve it, and it consumes what holds you to this world. You dismissed it. Now it flooded back like a flood, except it wasn't about the clock. It was about you. Fear, when acknowledged, can be tamed, can be measured and controlled. But silence was its true feast. It required the absence of truth, and you had stayed silent because to admit this nightmare was to become real. To speak its name was to bind it to your blood. The air turned viscous, as if the house itself was breathing, thick with the weight of your dread. The clock clicked, a cold metronome growing louder in your head. tick, tick, tick. You clawed at your own temples, trying to pull the voices from the shadows, trying to tear reality back to something solid. And then the tapping stopped, just like that. No warning. No pause breath escaped your lips. Relief. No, it was worse. The silence was louder than before. It pressed on your ears until a sound you dreaded blossomed in the stillness. The clock, a sudden chime, crashing out in a hollow, bone-rattling peal. Startled, you jerked backward, the air shredded into sharp, icy shards. The clock, so solid a moment ago, dissolved into a dark mist that swirled free. And then, without warning, a whisper crackled in your ear. You owe the fear. Time to pay. A figure, a darker shadow, stepped into the room. A shape just out of focus, but undeniably watching. No breath, no footsteps. Yet the cold pressed tighter, squeezing your ribs until you felt the brittle edge of your own breaking point. This was not death yet. No, this was something older, something unyielding, fear made flesh. And it had come to collect. Your fingers trembled around the fragile clock, now coalescing back into form. And you understood this was the last gambit. You could keep silence, let your terror feed the thing endlessly until you faded away like a candle guttering out in the dark. Or you could speak. You swallowed the scream, gathered every scrap of courage left buried beneath panic, and finally whispered a confession. The terror was real. You named it aloud. The loneliness, the regret, the hollow ache that gnawed in every moment since the gift had found you. You told the clock your story, every raw shard you had kept hidden. You spoke the names of your fears, as if calling old friends back from exile. The shadow flinched. The cold withdrew like a tide pulled back from shore. The ticking slowed to a heartbeat, matching your own then. The clock, heavy and silent in your hands, cracked open at its center. Inside, a folded note slipped free, fragile as a sigh. You unfolded it slowly. Written there, in the faded ink of a long-dead hand, were words you could have sworn you knew. The only way to stop the counting is to turn your fear into your strength. Outside, the first light of dawn seeped through cracked windows, feeble but stubborn. The cold receded. The air warmed with the promise of day. You were left holding the clock, still ticking, but no longer hungry. The darkness hadn't vanished, but you weren't alone. If you choose to keep it near, if your whispered dread aches for company, the clock will wait, a patient witness to your quiet war. But if you let go, perhaps it will count no more. Before we go further, write the hour and place your listening from in the comments. Like the video and subscribe if you haven't already.